Good morning and welcome to Submarine Live. We're delighted to have you with us. This week we are bringing the excitement and science of the Necton First Ascent mission to classes around the world. And we're doing that through a number of live broadcasts. We are having another submarine Q&A this morning, hooking up with the team who are in the Indian Ocean on board the Ocean Sapphire. And I'm just going to see if I can raise Denise in just a little bit. But first off, just to say a few thank yous to making Submarine Live possible. We are at the Sonodyne HQ here in the UK, and Sonodyne are the fantastic engineering firm who make a lot of the underwater communications on the expedition possible. Then we've got our AXA XL, who are the supporters of AXA XL Oceans Education, and Submarine Live is part of that work. We've got schools today from the UK, Portugal and Greece. Big shout out to Lauderdale Junior School. Good morning. Hi to everybody at Lauderdale. And to Avgulia Linodatu School in Athens. Wonderful to have you with us this morning. And I'm just seeing if I can get through. Ocean Sapphire, are you receiving?
Yes, I am hearing you loud and clear, Jamie.
Fantastic. It's really wonderful to have you with us. And Denise, you're a member of the Necton First Ascent science team, and I know we've got a number of questions about the work and exploration that you're up to. But could you just start off by telling us what the Necton First Ascent mission is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment we are in one of the most remote places of the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean. And the work we are doing here is essentially to explore the deeper ocean. And this is something that has never been done before in this area, hence why we call it the first ascent. And we basically do this for two reasons. First, we of course want to know what we all can find here. And second, this will help us help inform governments how to protect these areas better. We can identify areas that are especially important and make sure that they receive the protection they need.
Well, and you're quite a different expedition as from what I've sort of heard and can see, insofar that you're using submersibles as one of the tools to explore the deep ocean. How important is it to use these new technologies?
Oh, that is incredibly important. So much of the ocean research that has been done, most of the ocean research really, is focusing on just the top layer of the ocean. So that is from 0 to 30 meters, which is the area that we can scuba dive in. And it's quite easy to put scuba divers out there. But as soon as you go under 30 meters, you will need a lot of different technologies to study what is there. So we are incredibly happy and lucky to have these submersibles here, because that will tell us a lot more about everything below 30 meters, everything that we can just go in and explore physically as humans.
Amazing. And Denise, you're doing something slightly different. You're remaining on the surface but exploring the deep. This is what I'm hearing. How does that work?
So it's actually not that much of a contradiction as you may think, because the ocean is a 3D habitat essentially. So like the top layers are connected to the bottom layers. So basically everything what happens in the top layers influences what happens in the bottom layers and vice versa. So by studying all of these layers, we learn more about how they are connected and how they sort of depend on each other. So it's actually really important to do that together.
Fantastic. And what is your role on as part of the expedition science team?
Yeah, so I am currently doing my PhD at the University of Oxford. The Nexon headquarters are based in Oxford as well, so I was incredibly lucky to become involved in Nexon through the university. So for me, it's sort of a twofold thing. The data I collect here as part of the Nexon science team will go into my own research later on. So that's,
Fantastic.
yeah.
And what research is that exactly? Are you looking at the coral or the fish or the ocean in general?
Well, all of that together pretty much. I look at the type of habitats deep ocean species like, and I do that by looking at the 3D structure of those habitats. So like a lot of things, species just really like structures. Just like humans, we like to come into cities and we have nice buildings to live in. Just like that, a lot of ocean species prefer areas where there are a lot of different structures like rocks that provide little hiding spaces for them or coral reefs themselves. So I look at basically the relationship between life in the different layers of the ocean and the sort of structures you find there. And I do that by 3D modeling these environments.
3D modeling those environments. Wow, it sounds
That
like
is
it.
right,
How do
yes.
you 3D model the deep sea?
Oh, yes, that is a very exciting question. I use something called photogrammetry. And with photogrammetry, you use video images. I use the video images that our submersibles collect. Um, and those video images go into a program that will look for corresponding points between the different images. And that program is able to build up a 3D model of the habitat. And that allows us to look at in much more detail at those spaces than just from a simple 2D image, because you can twist the image around, like go inside and see what's happening there. And the second thing I do is use sonar images. So I also go out on a little boat where we'll be surveying the area um, using acoustic pulses. And my goal is to overlay those photogrammetry optical images with the acoustic images we get from the sonar, which sounds really complicated, but it's really two different techniques to create 3D images of those environments.
So I'm going to break this down, Denise, if I can, to try for
Absolutely,
my
yes, I can.
simple
I
brain.
understand.
So it
Please
sounds
do.
like
It's quite hard to explain a research in 1 minute. So yeah.
it
Yeah.
sounds like that you use underwater video essentially to make a sort of Minecraft model of the deep sea environment.
That is very true. I had someone compare it to a 90s video game earlier today, so that sounds pretty accurate. Um, yes, and then with that image, I can look at the sort of living spaces that are there for the species. So if we collect those video images, we also take counts of like the fish we see in that area or the different types of coral we have. And then I go into that model and then look at the relationship between the biodiversity we find and how that relates to structures in those models. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we've got some great questions coming through. Just before we get to those, you used a term in your earlier response, sonar, how you use
Sonar.
sonar to make a map. What is it and how does it work?
Sonar is a technique that is used a lot in maritime operations. It's mainly used to make a picture of the seabed. So what happens is that you have a transmitter which sends down an acoustic pulse or simply a sound.
Okay.
And that
Like
sound travels
is
all
that
the
a
way
ping in
down
a
to the sea.
submarine that you hear?
Yeah, it's called a ping. Yes, it's exactly that. So that ping travels down from the ship to the seabed and then bounces off the seabed and comes back up and will be received by that sonar. And based on the time that sound travels between sort of all the way down to the seabed and back up, the sonar will give you the distance between you in the ship and the seabeds. So by doing that multiple times, you can create a profile of a seabed and seabed features on it in relation to you in the ship.
So
So
if,
you're
yeah,
essentially measuring depth using sound.
depth using sound. So if you send a ping down like this and it comes back quite quickly, that's a shallow
Yes,
depth. And then if it's deeper, it
that's a
just
shallow depth.
ping, it takes
Yeah,
longer to come back up
it
again.
takes longer for that ping to come back
Got it.
up.
Learn,
Yes,
learn something every day.
exactly. I'm glad I can help.
Thank you so much. This is a
Not to
question
worry at all.
from Emma at St Mary's, who would love to know. Hi, Emma. She would love to know, how did you get your job?
Well, that is a great question, Emma. It's a combination of being extremely lucky and mostly going for what you like. So I've always really been interested in the ocean and studying the ocean. Um, and yeah, that first took me to study biology at university and specializing in marine biology and later on deep ocean biology. And at the same time, I was very interested in the use of technology in research. So yeah, combination of biology and technology and a lot of luck essentially.
And you're doing what's called an academic career, where you're working within the sort of university structure. What kind of advice would you give to people at elementary, middle school, or even high school if they wanted a similar sort of academic career?
Well, I would first of all encourage everybody to just go out and get as many experiences as you can possibly get in different fields, just mostly to figure out where your interests are and what you really like doing later on, because an academic career is not necessarily for everybody. Research means that you have to make long hours, and we are getting up at 6 in the morning every day and we'll be in the lab until 10 in the evening. So
Wow.
but we are working on things we really enjoy and are really interested in. So if your interests are in a specific area, absolutely go for it. But first, try and figure out what you are interested in and what you want to give your time to.
Great advice to follow your passion.
Yeah.
This is another question. This is from Terman at St Mary's. Thank you, Terman, for the question. What personal skills or interpersonal skills do you need to do this job? And I imagine they're quite different from being at a university to being on a research vessel.
Oh, absolutely. So that is a great question. So on this vessel, we are working with lots of different teams. Like we have a science team, of course, but we also have the ship's crew on board who are in charge of all the operations ship-wise. We have the submersible team on board. We have a lot of other different teams on board. So all these teams have to come and work together to achieve the same goal, essentially. So sometimes it's quite interesting to balance like what has the highest priority at that point. So you have to be quite good in communicating what is needed and also like finding space for other people. Another thing is that you are on a boat with each other 24/7 for 7 weeks long. So it is, yes, so most of us share cabins as well. So it's quite important to sort of like be sensible to the people around you and also take care of yourself if you need some personal space. But most of all, we are very happy and are all working towards the same thing and are loving what we are doing. So, yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And just as a quick follow-up question, I know we've got a couple of questions coming in, but what have you found most challenging personally about being on expedition, being on the 7-week research voyage?
Oh, what have I found most? Well, I guess one of well, not necessarily I found most challenging, but you have to be always ready to go. Like, I mean, things change all the time. Like, well, you might make a plan in the morning, but that plan can be changed like during the day, depending on other things happening. An example we had is that one of our submersible pilots unfortunately had a little trip and he injured his back yesterday. So that's of course horrible for him. But that also means that the science dive cannot happen as planned. So that means that our schedule gets changed and we have to be very flexible and adapt to that quickly. And that can be challenging at times, especially if you've set everything up for one operation. But it's also, it keeps us on our toes and keeps us busy and running around. So yes, that's
very challenging. This is a question coming through from Lauderdale Primary School. Is what interested you first of all in researching deeper in the ocean?
what it is. Sorry, could you repeat that?
Of course.
You just broke up a little bit. Yeah.
The question was, why are you interested in researching deeper in the ocean?
Oh, that is a fantastic question that I would love to answer. Multiple reasons, really, but the most important one is that we know very, very little about this environment, and it's so different from everything that we are used to as humans on land. So the deeper you go in the ocean, like the more your environment changes. Like you won't have light anymore. It gets cold. You are under, like, species are under high pressure, and that means that all of the creatures that live in the deep ocean have evolved special adaptations to deal with those conditions. And studying those animals, well, and plants teaches us a lot about how life evolved, but also on how life responds to different conditions. And a lot of people actually compare deep ocean research to research on other planets or on the moon. But the reality at this stage is that we know more about the moon and Mars than we do about the deep ocean. So there's a lot of like life to discover in the deep ocean still, and we are really looking up when there's a lot of things to be discovered down there about the strange life forms. Yeah.
And is there anything that you're hoping to see in the deep ocean?
Oh, well, anything really. Like, I have had my first submersible dive last week, and that was just a mind-blowing experience. Some of the things I saw included hammerhead sharks, which had been a dream to see since I was very, very little, basically. But then also a lot of coral species that I had been reading about in books, and just to be able to see them in real life was an absolutely great experience for me. And from some of my colleagues, I heard that they went down and saw sunfish. And sunfish is a really big flat fish that looks like it's been chopped in half.
I think we've got a
And
picture
it
of the
can grow up
sunfish
to 4
coming
meters.
through as well.
Oh, you do? Great. Yeah. Well, that is just such a strange fish that I would absolutely love to see one time.
And huge as well. I mean, what kind of sizes are we talking about?
As well, they can grow up to 4 meters. I think the one my colleague saw was about 3 meters long.
3 meters.
So yes, imagine, which is about the size of the submersible. So imagine that being down there. Yes, incredible indeed. So yeah, just those experiences are just absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, Teddy from King's Primary in Edmonton, just thinking a little bit sort of more generally, what was it about the ocean that first sort of interested you, that first seized your imagination?
So I think this happened when I was I was quite young, and it was the first time snorkeling. I think I was in the water I stayed in the water for 5 hours, but just how completely different the underwater world is from everything we know on land, and actually how little we know about how that ecosystem functions, because it's just not the environment that humans live in, the environments that humans like know a lot about. So for me, it was really trying to figure out like how what humans can learn from the ocean, and or also how we can interact with the ocean in a sustainable way. That drove me to marine biology in the first place.
Incredible. We might come to some of that sustainability later in this call. But now we have
Sure.
a big hello from 3B at Lauderdale Junior School, who have a question. Is it scary down there on a submarine?
Oh, hello, 3B. That is a funny question. I wasn't scared, but I can imagine that a lot of people do get a bit scared. So when you first go down, the submersible just tilts forward out of the way, so it feels like you're falling. It's almost like you're in a roller coaster, although it happens very slowly. So you're just tilted downward and then start slowly descending. But at the same time, you have this amazing view around you, so you can see like everywhere. It is sort of like, it's a sort of opposite of like fish in a fishbowl. Like we are the fish, like looking at everything outside the fishbowl now. It's like, so I mean, it can be a bit scary, I guess, especially when you go down to the deeper waters when it gets dark. But to be honest, I was too distracted by everything around me and how amazing it was to be scared at any point.
Did you ever have for a moment? Wow, I'm actually sort of, I am in this acrylic bubble somewhere where I shouldn't really be, and what happens if something goes wrong?
No, I didn't have that at all. My feeling was more like, oh, this is amazing. I'm in this acrylic bubble, and I'm seeing things that I would never be able to see otherwise. So yes, no, I didn't. We also get a safety briefing from our pilots before the dive, so we are very well prepared in case something does happen and what we should do. So it's yeah.
That's very good to know. Zainab at Lauderdale would like to know, what is your favourite underwater animal?
Oh, my favorite underwater animal. I have recently developed a love for brittle stars. Brittle stars are they're very closely related to starfish, but they have very little bodies and much longer arms, with which they sort of like crawl around over the seabed. And they are just very funny animals to look at. They can also swim, where they make a sort of wiggle with their arms to the sides, but mostly they hanging out in soft corals. And basically, when we collect samples, we bring up a few brittle stars every time. So I'm very lucky and look at them under the microscope and take pictures of all of them, and do really like them.
What does a brittle star look like under a microscope?
What does it look like? Well, it has a very, very tiny body and then these long arms. But if you zoom into it, you can see on the body that there's sort of like 5 little dots, essentially, where the arms come from. So you can see it's sort of like divided in 5 parts. And then also, most of them have very specific patterning, or some of them may have tiny spikes. They can have very bright colors. So there's lots of different ways to recognize the different species of them, but all of them are very beautiful.
Fantastic. So here we have a question from Inaya in 3B at Lauderdale. How deep have you been in the ocean, and how deep does the ocean go?
Oh, that is a good question. So the dive I went on with the submersibles went down to 120 meters. The submersibles go to 250 meters, but I haven't been that deep. We also have some other equipment called ROVs, which stands for remotely operated vehicles. And the ones we have here can go down to 500 meters, so that's about twice as deep as the subs go. But if you compare that to the overall depth of the ocean, which is on average 4 kilometers, but in the deepest parts it can be 11 kilometers deep, you can see that there's still quite a far way to go below those 500 meters that we are reaching here. So lots of things to explore and discover.
And so, just in terms of the research, so normal scuba research by scientists is the sort of top 30
Yeah,
meters.
that's the top 30 meters.
And then you've been looking at the next sort of like 200, sort of 220 meters in the submersibles. And I think
Yes,
we've got some
exactly.
footage. I don't know whether we've already shown it of what it sort of looks like down at sort of 250 meters. This is a sort of darker zone down in the
Yeah,
deep. And so, I mean,
that is.
just down at sort of 120 meters, what kind of light levels were you seeing?
So at 120 meters, light still does come through every now and then. So we do see some species that we see in sort of the 30-meter zone where light always comes through. But then also we see some animals that just have completely adapted to live without any light. But if we go deeper, we come into a zone where it's dark more permanently. So you can see that the life there just completely shifts. So we see a sort of gradient in the species we find from the lighter zones to the sort of zone where light sometimes comes and sometimes doesn't, to the completely dark zone. So and 120 would still be the zone where light does come through every now and then. And also when we were down there, it was an extremely bright day. The water was very clear, so it was quite light. But in the 250, it already starts to get pretty dark. And on a bright day, we may have some light coming through there, but most of the time it is just dark. Yeah.
That's incredible. It sounds like another world. And going back to the brittle star, which I think that, I mean, is it a type of starfish?
It is closely related to starfish, yes. It's not a starfish, but they
or a sea
they
star,
are
sorry,
the same.
to give it its proper name.
Yeah, that's true. Off right.
This is from 3G. Is what's the strangest animal or thing that you have seen in the ocean apart from a brittle star?
Oh, the strangest, well, a thing that I haven't seen yet. Well, I have seen it on some of the videos we had, but I haven't seen it myself yet. That is very strange, is something called a siphonophore. I don't know if you are able to pull up an image of that, but if you look at that, you can see it's very strange. It looks like a sort of long,
yeah.
yeah, it looks like a sort of long column of, I mean, it's sort of a jelly-like substance, really, and it's actually a big colony of organisms that float through the water column together in that sort of long shape, and it can really be meters long. And that is the way they live. It's a whole colony of these animals just sticking together and floating around.
I mean, I've always thought that if you get an anaconda and you cross it with a jellyfish and you make it see-through, that seemed to me with a siphonophore what it looked like.
It sounds like a fantastic comparison, and I couldn't have explained it better. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, we will try and get some of that video footage over, because they're quite extraordinary creatures, or colonies of creatures, yes. Even.
Yeah.
So love to see, get some footage of one of those. So here we are. So Ian and 3B would like to know, have you seen any scary animals down there, and were you afraid when you saw the hammerheads?
I wasn't afraid, because we are quite well protected in our submersible. The layer of acrylic material we have around us is probably, like, it's definitely multiple centimeters thick. So they're about that thick. What is that, 10 centimeters?
10 centimeters,
more,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so there's no way they're gonna get through that. But so no, I haven't been afraid. In terms of other dangers, I mean, there's quite a few sharks down there, but in a submersible, we don't have to be afraid of them. Like, I wouldn't go swimming out here because of in the area we are now has quite a few sharks, but in
Okay.
a submersible we'd probably be fine.
Perfect. And we're getting some questions through about coral reefs, and I'm imagining that the students posting the questions are thinking about your typical Finding Nemo shallow tropical reef. Is that
hmm
kind of environment that you find, and how far down does that kind of environment go?
So those sort of beautiful, like shallow tropical waters, coral reefs, are the type of reefs that we find here in the surface waters. And they do extend quite far down. So they basically go down until the area where light becomes less abundant. So that's about 30 meters again, 30, 40, 50 meters, something like that. But even in those first few 50 meters, you already see shifts in the type of corals you find, depending on like the amount of light you get. But yeah, the deeper you go, the more different your corals get. So the corals in the top layers of the ocean, they form a symbiosis with algae, and the algae take in the light and give the coral its energy. But if you go deeper, there will not be enough light anymore for those algae to continue living and give energy to the corals. So that means the corals that do grow down there rely on a different type of food source. So corals can do two things basically. They can live together with that algae, or they can just grab the food particles themselves from the water column. Like all corals consist of little polyps, and polyps are much like jellyfish really. They have little tentacles that they can stick out in the water column and grab food particles. Um, so yeah, the deeper you go, the more of the corals you get that go for that second option. And they also look quite a bit different than the hard corals we find in the top layers. But yeah, we have been seeing corals down to 250 meters in the subs already, and I am sure that the reefs can extend like quite a bit further still. Um, it's just the type of coral that differs between the layers, not so much the coral itself. Yeah.
So near the surface, you have what I'm going to just term your Finding Nemo coral,
Yes,
which are these tiny jellyfish-like animals that live in these sort of structures they make.
the anemones, you mean?
Well,
Or
no,
the-
I mean
Yeah,
the coral polyp being related to an anemone,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but
Yeah,
they create often these sort of stony structures, the
that's
shape that
true.
you see.
Yes,
And those ones are getting,
that's
we
very
used
true.
a word called symbiosis, and that means that they're living
Yes,
together.
that does mean that they are living together and they depend on each other too. So the algae does not only give the coral its food, but the coral also gives the algae something in return, which is mostly protection from things that would feed on the algae. So because the algae lives in the coral, it is safe from anything that might try to eat it. Yeah.
And so that's a bit like having your own vegetable garden living inside you.
Yeah, would, that sounds pretty nice actually.
That
Yeah.
does sound quite nice,
Yeah.
or if not a bit odd. But the deeper you go, because those plant-like algae need light. If you go really deep, the so the coral then has to behave more like a sort of upside-down jellyfish catching particles.
Exactly, it's a sort of upside down, catching food particles that float by in the water column. So,
And
yeah.
what do those deep corals look like? Do they look different?
Yeah, we have seen quite a few different species already. Actually, I did a count this morning of the amount of coral samples we brought up. We've brought up 57 different coral species so far, so that is quite exciting. And once we're back in Oxford, we will be working on describing those different species and identifying what exactly they are. But yeah, if you compare the species in the deep to what you find in the shallow waters, you're finding Nemo corals, you will see that they typically are much smaller. That is because it takes a lot longer to sort of catch the energy from food particles in the water column than if you have your own vegetable garden living in yourself that can just give you the food whenever you wanted. But also we see a lot more corals that have a fan shape down there. In the surface waters, lots of corals are sort of hard and big, or massive, as we call them, or encrusting corals. They have hard skeletons. And we see a lot more softer corals in the deeper waters that also have a lot of different shapes compared to the shallow water corals.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Denise, for that sort of great explanation of coral reef. That was Shadut, who was interested and is studying coral reefs at the moment in class.
Fantastic.
We've got a question now from Asan, who's asking about luminescence in some animals. Is luminescence something you see, and at what depth does that kind of behavior start?
So bioluminescence is something that we actually already start seeing in the shallow water layers, but it does extend all the way down, and the deeper you go, the more important it gets, really, because a lot of species, because there is no light down there, species have sort of developed this adaptation to create their own light, and some species even communicate in those light signals. So some studies have been done that show that specific species like pulse light at different frequencies or at different colors, and you can even identify species for the type of light patterns they give off. Well, I haven't seen any of that yet, unfortunately, but I would be very interested, and I'm actually quite excited to be able to see something like that. But at night, here we do something called Newson nets, where we drag nets behind the boat and we try and catch plankton from the surface layers of the water. And at night, because of the movement of the water, we do see some types of bioluminescent plankton, like that start giving up light because of the movements they get. And that is the closest I've come to seeing bioluminescence in the deep ocean, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, I think seeing glowing tiny plants, algae on the surface of the water, glowing at night in the middle of the Indian Ocean, isn't too bad.
Yes, no, sorry, you are right. I have nothing to complain about. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A couple of questions now. This one from Tanvir. What is the most shocking or surprising discovery that you have made in the ocean?
That I have made in the ocean. Well,
you can broaden it out if you want to talk about somebody else's.
I am gonna broaden it out
Okay.
because personally, I wouldn't dare to claim I've made a shocking discovery yet, but we have seen quite some interesting things already. We have, for example, seen a species of shark in the deeper waters that we thought only lived in like shallower water layers.
Really?
So to see it deeper is actually quite interesting and
what
quite
type of
significant,
shark was
because
that?
that tells us it was a 6-gill shark.
Okay.
Yes.
And you found
so. Yeah, but basically seeing that shark down there tells us a bit more about the connectivity between water layers too, and could potentially be a special feature for this whole region of the ocean. And some of its shark is just an example, but we have seen quite a few other species with quite extended ranges compared to what we've known so far. So that is actually quite interesting. We are learning a lot about where species actually live, and like what patterns they have over the ocean floor here in the Indian Ocean, and that is a lot of new information and could help us massively in informing how to best protect the ocean.
Wonderful. So the 6-gill shark as a discovery, and not where we thought it might be. Stanley from King's Primary, Edmonton, would like to know what is your favourite part of your job?
Oh, my favorite part is that every day is just new and exciting. Like in the morning, we don't know what we are going to find during the day. That is because this expedition is so new and no one has ever been here before. So everything we do is sort of, we are the first explorers here, and which makes it extremely exciting. And it is just, yeah, fantastic to be here and just to see what every new day brings us. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Denise, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Just before we started to come to the end of this call, could you tell us a little bit, you talk about sort of governance and protecting the ocean. What are some of the things that students in their classrooms should be thinking about?
So, well, there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to protecting the ocean, but one big thing is that the ocean, well, the Indian Ocean where we are now, but also like in a lot of extended parts of the ocean, they don't fall under any national legislation. So like big parts of the ocean don't belong to any country, which means that no country really has the responsibility to protect that part of the ocean. And that is why it's really, really important to think about ways in which we can come up with solutions internationally to protect those areas of the ocean that really don't belong to any country. Um, right here, we are in waters that do belong to a country. These are Seychelles waters, and we are working with the government here to find ways to best protect them. Another special thing about this area is that the ocean is also very, very important for the population of the Seychelles. A lot of people are dependent on the ocean, are dependent on fishing, for example, or have livelihoods that depend on what they bring out of the ocean. So it's really, really important to think about balancing what is there and also balancing how to sustain the people that live in the country in that way. And I could go on about this topic for a really long time, but I believe those are two important messages for now. Yeah.
Wow, so there are huge swathes of our ocean that nobody is responsible for, or everybody is
Yeah.
responsible for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also you have to, we can't just put a gate around the ocean and say nobody can use it because people are so dependent on the ocean in many ways.
Well, Denise, thank you so much for sparing the time out of what I know is a very busy schedule. I mean, getting up at 6 and going to bed at 10. So we're very thankful for you having spared the time to speak to these classes. So thank you again. And it's a sort
Not
of
at all. It
bye
was
bye
a
for now.
pleasure talking to all of you. Bye bye, everyone.
All right,
Please.
thank you so much. Bye
I
bye.
hope you enjoyed this. Yes, thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you so
Fantastic.
much, Denise.
Bye.
Bye. And wonderful again to connect to the Nectin First Descent mission, exploring the uncharted depths around the Seychelles archipelago. We have more sessions today, and the rest of the week we have a live investigation, how to be an ROV scientist, in just 15-20 minutes. We have further Q&A sessions and live investigations throughout this week as part of Submarine Live, broadcasting from Sonnedyne HQ. We've also got, again as part of AXA XL Oceans Education, we have Arctic Live. So if you've enjoyed Submarine Live, do join us in the Arctic from the 1st to the 8th of May this year. But thank you so much for all your wonderful questions. Thank you so much to the students at St Mary's, at Lauderdale Junior School, at Avgulia Leonardatu School in Athens, and to King's Primary Edmonton. For now, it's goodbye from Submarine Live, and see you again very shortly. Goodbye.